Welcome to the only daily podcast focusing on compliance news of the day. Each morning, start your day with a cup of coffee and Tom Fox, the voice of compliance, to hear about 4 of the top compliance, corruption, or leadership stories you will need to start your day. The Daily Compliance News is a production of the Compliance Podcast Network.
First, a word from our sponsor. The Daily Compliance News for January 27, 2022, the Big Papi edition. And we begin with that story as Big Papi, David Ortiz, was the only person elected to the Baseball Hall of Fame. PED users Roger Clemens and Alex Rodriguez, Barry Bonds were kept out of the Hall of Fame as well. So query, are cheaters going to be kept out of baseball? What does this mean for Carlos Beltran, Carlos Correa, or any of the other people associated with the Astros 2017 World Series win? But the Hall of Fame voters made a clear statement on Bonds and Clements that they don't want them in the Hall of Fame. So at least two cheaters are kept out of the Hall of Fame, although it is noted Big Papi did test positive once. Next up, a big setback for antitrust actions in Europe and a big win for Intel as Intel won a reprieve from a $1.2 billion fine issued by EU regulators way back in 2009. The EU Court of Justice struck down, or rather the EU General Court struck down much of the 2009 finding that Intel abused its dominant position by issuing loyalty rebates and payments that restricted rival chipmaker Advanced Micro Devices. Next up from Compliance Week, the Transparency International 2021 Corruption Perception Index is out, and as Jacqueline Jaeger, writing in Compliance Week, said, shows the world not willing to make any real changes around bribery and corruption. Corruption levels remain at a global standstill or have worsened slightly, and she believes this highlights a disturbing trend for companies, governments, and citizens alike. And our final story is Johnson & Johnson, which had sued 2 whistleblowers who testified at a trial against Johnson & Johnson. The whistleblowers were doctors, or rather surgeons, who served as expert witnesses in lawsuits over J&J's hip replacements. And the J&J won on these trials, and they tried to sue the doctors for misusing confidential records in this mass tort litigation while pursuing their own whistleblower claims. Fortunately for all whistleblowers everywhere, the U.S. magistrate rejected most of Johnson & Johnson's claim. It did award costs, which are rather nominal, but the attempt by Johnson & Johnson to seek damages would have been very troubling in a claim against whistleblowers.
The Daily Compliance News is a production of the Compliance Podcast Network and a proud member of C-Suite Radio. Thanks so much for listening. I hope you'll join me again tomorrow.
This podcast is a part of the C-Suite Radio Network. For more top business podcasts, visit c-suiteradio.com.